Good afternoon, welcome everybody. Welcome to the second global session of the SRT conference. We're gaining more and more people are welcoming. I'm just going to give the attendees 30 more seconds so that more people can join. I'm seeing that the virtual room is filling in with people, and to give them some more time. So welcome to the second global session with the topic, the human side of admissions in a digital age. I have to admit that I saw the title from an article, but with our speakers, we are actually getting into a very different direction from what the article initially was all about. So first, when I started thinking about this topic, I thought about what digital age in the world of applications and admissions is. And I have to admit, I asked ChatGPT to help me to see what he's going to reply. And he said that nowadays, when we talk about digital age, it's about a fundamental shift where nearly every part of a student's journey, from discovering universities, presenting themselves, to being evaluated, and getting accepted, is shaped by digital systems. So admissions is no longer purely a human-to-human exchange. It's a human story, but one that is increasingly mediated by platforms and algorithms and data, which raises some important questions. Are we still hearing the student's authentic voice? Has authenticity itself changed in a digital environment? And does digital access truly level the playing field, or does it create new forms of inequality? So to explore this, I'm delighted today to be joined by Ms. Ana Maria Costea, Regional Manager for Latin America at the University of Cambridge, Ms. Kuppersmith, an IC from the States, Dr. Paula Lameu, Career Advisor at San Francisco in Brazil, and Mr. Dennis Vasquez, Associate Director of College Counseling at Rai Country Day School at the USA. So without any further waste of time, I suggest we dive into the topic. And let's first discuss a little bit whether admissions is still human. So my first question would be, in a process now so heavily shaped by digital systems, do you feel admissions is still fundamentally human, or has the nature of the process itself changed? And I'd like to start with Paula, because she sent me some notes on her answers, and she had a very poignant sentence there that I hope she would repeat.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I would like to apologize if you're going to hear some noise, because I am in the middle of a school day and students are coming and going here, and I'm in the middle of the building, so sorry about that. Although I'm a college counselor, I believe that admissions is basically made by humans and for humans. So regardless of the use of technology, it is the human element that is going to bring authenticity, you know. So during college counseling sessions, we keep saying to students that they need to be genuine, they need to be authentic. So we can show them that no matter how much they use their AI, it's still not them that it's going to appear in their personal statement, depending on how much they use this AI. And it's the same to the other side, you know. So the final decision when the admissions office is reading everything the student sent, it's going to be from the admissions officer perspective. So because it is not about the fact, but it's about the feeling they are going to have about that student. So it's that what I believe. So the admissions office is going to make the decision about who is the best match to their institution. So it's the technology, it's only a tool that is going to help only.
Thank you, Paula. And Dennis, you have a lot of students on your head. So do you feel that the admissions is still fundamentally human?
Yeah, so again, hi from the New York City area. If you hear some noise, we all class actually of another college counselor giving a class to 11th graders, coincidentally about the things that we're talking about. To answer your question, Nia, I actually taught this same class at an earlier period, and we were talking about just understanding what it's like on the other side of the desk. You know, we have all these electronic tools to help by the admissions process. And some of these things, unfortunately, are being substituted by AI. But still, at the end of the day, it's still going to be a human being, an admissions counselor that's going to make that final decision if the student is going to be waitlisted, accepted, denied, that sort of thing. The point of this exercise that we were teaching the students is to see that even though that the students are countless hours writing their personal statements, trying to make their supplements very personalized with stories, unfortunately, on the other side of the desk, it becomes paperwork and becomes a computer screen of what these students are kind of pouring into their souls. And that's the human aspect of it, which unfortunately get lost because of the translation of the way that the process goes. So I do believe that inherently it is human, but just because of the technology nowadays, it's making it quicker, but it's kind of losing that touch that unfortunately they don't see that the students are going through, and they're teenagers, they're kids. So that's the piece of it that we still try to kind of hold on to on the college or the high school side. I'm sorry.
Interesting note you're making there. Evan, how about you? You're an IC, but you also work with students at the school, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, I help students with their whole application process. And I agree with what Dennis said, although I also think that has always been the case where students are pouring their soul into it. But even in a paper, it's still a little harder, but it's still human. It's still a human making decisions. They're still, looking at it with their own perspective in a sense. Anyhow, you can't always leave that. And I always tell kids, sometimes you may get that admissions officer first thing in the day and they're fresh. Sometimes you might get them last thing. It's sort of, there's always going to be a human element to it. And as Paula said, you need to be authentic. The more you can help them understand who you are through the sources that you can use, the better.
Thank you, Evan. And Anna Maria, your university's perspective, you're not working directly with the students applying to Cambridge and you're not part of the admissions office, but what are your observations?
Thank you. Yes, and hello, everybody. I'm very excited to be here. And like Nia said, I work for the University of Cambridge. I do help prospective students from Latin America who want to apply at the University of Cambridge with information and guidance and advice, but I don't look at their application. I'm not the assessor of that application. That's the job of our colleges to do that. But coming back to your question about whether it's still human, and I agree with all my colleagues here today. It's still human because it is a human being deciding about what they want to study or think about their career, think about what they enjoy, and then on the other side is a human deciding whether they should admit that student or not. But all of this is obviously mediated nowadays by these digital tools and platforms, but even these digital tools and platforms are set up by humans. So it's all about that sort of human decision making of how do we create this, what is the criteria, and what systems do we create. Are these systems designed in such a way to allow for that human element to come through, to allow for that context, to see that application in more human perspective and not just numbers? So that human element goes it goes through there as well. And especially for Cambridge, we do have quite a holistic way of assessing students. And we do have, in the UK, we do ask for contextual information in the teacher reference. We do ask for any external extenuating circumstances and so on, just to tap into that human element in the admissions process.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna Maria. And all of you actually reached out to the point of authenticity and how AI is changing the student voice. So do you think that authenticity is something that we can still meaningfully assess in this digital environment nowadays, or has the concept itself changed a little bit? Dennis, let's start with you.
Yeah, I like to think that most students and teachers, I'm not a teacher, I'm a counselor. I'd like to think that most students are using AI for the right reasons, to do research, to simplify things. I also know that high school students these days are very stressed, and shortcuts to them are very attractive things to use. So if there's more requirements for these college applications, it would make sense to them as humans, quote unquote, to use AI to their advantage. Some students have been very honest with me. It's like, Mr. Vasquez, like I tried using my idea here, but I know that this is really competitive to get into this college right now. And at the end of the day, the competition of these colleges is so brutal. Like I need every tool I could get to advance me to that next level. I totally understand that. And they're also saying to me, we also know that the admissions officers in the colleges are using what they have to do to kind of make their systems better. So it's kind of like a catch-22 where people are kind of doing what they have to do in order to make their objectives better. I'm seeing that more obviously from the high school side. So I'm hoping that the right things are there, but I think it's also based on what the student experiences using AI and then their needs for it, if that makes sense.
It makes sense, and I'm going to go back to your reference catch-22 for my next question. But first, let me hear it from Paula and then Ewan. Is authenticity something we can still meaningfully assess in a digital environment, or has the concept changed? Paula?
Sorry, could you say that again because it broke when you mentioned Nia?
Of course, is authenticity something we can still meaningfully assess in a digital environment, or has the concept itself changed?
I think it kind of changed a little bit because in the past, authenticity used to mean to be genuine, to mean how you could demonstrate your culture. As nowadays, as we move from country to country, these boundaries are a little bit blurred. Yeah. So I think with technology, social media, in recent years, we can see that with digital platforms, this idea is a little bit more complex because teenagers mainly they are being more performatic to show things and to show maybe who they are not and to what people expect them to be. But despite of these facts, it's still about who they are. It's still about what they want to demonstrate about how they are genuine. So in the past, how did we use to demonstrate how we are genuine? So when we are writing our personal statement, we used to use a dictionary. If we are not sure about one word or the other, we used to ask our teachers, we used to use a thesaurus. So in which extent asking for other ideas from AI isn't it the same of asking a thesaurus? Of course, now we can ask for a whole sentence to compare or ideas of different sentences. So in a way, I can ask for AI for ideas, but in the end, it's still the decision of the student to use it or not, to choose if that sentence that AI is suggesting is appropriate to what he wants to represent himself or herself. So I think that the choice is still from the student.
Thank you. And Ewan, in your work, together with the students, you also meet a lot with the parents. And do you notice some trends with the parents forcing sometimes maybe their children to use more and more tools in order to improve their work and make it even better and more effective?
Interestingly, the parents that I work with tend not to. I mean, they know there's tools. They're fine if they use organize their thoughts, those sorts of things. But I think parents are looking at it that I'm the tool, and they want me to be, to help, which is why they have come to me in the first place. So it has been interesting. Again, I can tell when a kid comes to me and the essay is not written by them, and sometimes it's AI, sometimes it's someone my age, and I'm like, but this isn't you. And the person who can best tell your story is you, because you've lived it and you need to, that's part of who you are. And that's ultimately what universities want to see, is they're trying to get to know you. So, and I get it, like parents get afraid, they want the best for their kids. They're like, I want them to be happy. But yeah, they also they seem to know that if their kid just uses AI, it's not going to work out as well. And yes, they'll have them use tools digitally, like to research and things like that. But yeah, I haven't seen as much of feeling that need to have it do everything.
Thank you. And Anna Maria, to twist the question a little bit for you, if students applying to Cambridge are using AI to refine or even generate parts of their applications, does that necessarily make them less authentic from the university's perspective?
So I did actually look, as I was curious, I looked to see whether we do have a policy around AI, and we do actually, that is applied to undergraduate admissions as well. So the use of AI is not forbidden. So students are, encouraged to use it. As with my colleagues here today, they said about using it to structure your thoughts or to gather some ideas or to research. But it's not to look at AI as a substitution of your own thoughts. It's a tool to help you maybe organize your thoughts or brainstorm or look for research, but not to substitute your own thoughts and what you want to convey, your own expression, to substitute that with what an AI can, the output of an AI agent. And I was smiling when Paula said about, the AI, how is AI different than an agent on another person writing your personal statement? Because these things could have happened in the past, before technology, before AI, right? So it's still a case of the technology does not really affect that authenticity as long as AI or tools are used in structuring your thoughts and not in representing yourself. I smiled when Paula mentioned about the performance as well, because I did write in my notes something about students maybe thinking of the perfect formula. How do I present myself? What's the formula to get accepted at Cambridge or to get accepted somewhere else? And then they perform that act, or they, because of so much noise and so many choices, they might just default back to maybe choosing a university for its prestige and not necessarily whether they would have a good time there or whether it's a good fit for them. So again, that could alter the authenticity in that way, but not necessarily technology and not necessarily AI. I don't think so.
Thank you. And I'm going to pile on, you mentioned information, and I'd like to discuss a little bit the access to information and control, and whether obviously students nowadays, we consider them to be very well informed. They have access to all the internet, the tools, the rankings, TikToks, Instagram, whatever. Does this actually make them more informed, or is just a lot of noise that they don't know how to navigate? Dennis, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think in the eyes and experience of a teenager, this could be applied to every aspect of their life, not just the college process, but for social media, for music, for news. There's just way too much noise, I guess, in my opinion. I'm being kind of biased here because my youngest son is also in high school. I think when it comes to the college process, it for me could come very confusing because I could probably guess that my colleagues here, they are working with parents that are very particular about rankings and that sort of thing. So, they're going to go to this site for this level of ranking and this site for that ranking. And it gets very confusing because, the colleges are trying to, show certain statistics, but if you are very smart and analytical, the data that they're using could be very fabricated. I hate to say that. But it's just like with any business, they want to showcase their institution as best as possible because it's a business. They want clients, they want students, enrollments, that sort of thing. So when this data is shared, I guess for the student, being less experienced as adults, they're not as knowledgeable as the way that the data and the rankings could be less useful to them than constructive. So we're always paying attention to that. That's one of the classes that we teach for our students, how to use the rankings to their advantage, the overflow of information that you could access on the internet.
Thank you, Dennis. And Paula, on to you.
I think we have a little bit of both because there are many, as I agree with Dennis, because we have a lot of different information around. The students can get a little bit lost about everything. And we also have to think about the aspect of control of these gadgets and the access of internet, because sometimes we think that by punishing or removing all these gadgets from the student life, which kind of control we are really having, because first of all, it's part of their life. So when we just remove, we are not teaching them how to use it. So who is the responsibility to teach them? Is it the family? Is it the school's responsibility? These are questions that I usually ask myself as part of society, as an educator. So I believe it's necessary to have a joint effort from school and family to teach them how to use it. So, and I believe it's also necessary to have a little bit more knowledge, because the ones who are informed about how to use are the ones that are not going to be so tricky on fake news or phishing, because we are all exposed and many of us are still getting to that. So I believe that the more we teach, the more we learn, it's going to be better for everybody.
Thank you, Paula. That said, I was teaching my mom how to use ChatGPT for different things, and my mom was very, very happy because at the end it wished her good night. So she was surprised by its kindness. Evan, when it comes to you and your students and parents, how do you help them separate the noise, the fake information from the real one?
So as Paula said, I mean, you have to show them. And it's overwhelming. I mean, sometimes I even find it overwhelming. You have all these different sources that can come. So when I like to start with my students sort of small, I don't want to give them all the schools they may possibly want to apply to. It's more like, let's start here and let's see. And I go through with them like the tools that they can use and websites they can go to, and also explain how to try to be discerning when they're looking at websites. Don't take everything just at face value. Okay, there's a poll saying X about this school. How many people answered that poll? When was it taken? How many are at the school that could have answered the poll? You know, those sorts of things, and explaining that you may see something on YouTube or TikTok, and it's like, but that's one person. And helping them kind of really, and I tell them, you're kind of like a detective. You're going to hear conflicting things too. And so you have to decide who's telling the truth. Is it this one, or is it somewhere in the middle? And granted, that's still a challenge, but that's why I always say, let's take it slow. Let's take our time. You know, you're not doing this at the last minute. It's not like you have to apply to all your universities tomorrow. So that's pretty much how I approach it.
Thank you, Evan. And Anna Maria, a bit tricky, and I'm not sure whether you would know, but do you know whether at Cambridge there is a system that tries to, so to say, clear the information for Cambridge, so to get rid of all the possible fake information that can be found on the internet in order to spread the proper information about what the university is looking for?
Yeah, of
and
course.
what it offers also.
Yeah, of course, we do have a lot of online guidance, information sessions. We exist as a team to support students through that sort of process as well, because we're aware of the increase in noise basically as well. And also the University of Cambridge, for example, does not work with agents. So we say that all the information is clear, is transparent, is all accessible to everybody that wants to know about it. We do have lots of sessions to kind of enable students to understand more about what it takes to be at Cambridge and what it takes to be accepted at Cambridge. But I do agree with everyone. And what Ellen was just saying here is tapping into that sort of critical thinking skills that actually Cambridge is looking for. So it's not just looking about a great IB score or a brilliant reference or anything like that. They are also looking at the actual human element. Is this student having the critical thinking skills? Are they able to think independently and critically about the subject? Are they open and curious about the world? And they assess that throughout the holistic application process, but also in the interview, for example. So we are quite fortunate to have this sort of in-person or online interview approach at Cambridge. I would just like to point out that because of the increase of all the resources and the noise, I think students do tend to have this sort of cognitive overload. It's a bit of a decision fatigue. It's like when you're going to a supermarket, you want to buy something and you see 10, 20 types of things, and then you start overthinking and start looking at labels and which one is better for that, for what I need, and so on. Same with if you go into a restaurant and you have a 50-page menu, right? It's that cognitive overload. It just puts more pressure on you, and you think because you have so many choices, you're more empowered, but that doesn't mean you have more agency. It can mean you're more under pressure or more confused or more likely to not get the right choice. And that's why it's important to have that human element there, to have us guiding students, and to have counselors guiding students as well, that understands, what sort of things they're up against and how to navigate this tricky environment we're in.
Thank you. When I was applying to university exactly 20 years ago, at least here from Bulgaria, I still had to send my documents by post to my university in the Netherlands, and that was incredibly expensive. With DHL, Bulgarian post offices are completely unreliable, which costed a lot, about 1/10, if not more, from my tuition fee, actually. And now with the digitalization, sending applications through platforms and emails, this obviously solves this type of problem for many students who might not have the resources to use postal services. So we usually think that the digitalization is actually helping reducing inequalities. But do you think that's true? That's really the case? Do digital systems in admissions reduce inequalities, or do they risk reinforcing it in new ways? Dennis, what do you think?
I would say off the top of my head, it's become more efficient. I do remember those days when I had to lick envelopes and stuff envelopes with papers of my application, use whiteout to make corrections, ride my bicycle literally to the post office and mail and wait for the news to get back in the post office. And these days, the students do everything with a click of a button on their cell phone, and the application fees is connected to their Apple Pay. So it's so much easier. So I do think that in terms of efficiency, it does make it a lot easier for students. But what I do think that they're losing, unfortunately, because of the technology, is just the amount of work that once was there, or that we could all experience. It's not just about typing anymore. I remember, using a pen and writing in cursive, and that could show that I was taking my time with my writing. All those old school values that have been lost, unfortunately, with the technology has lost that human element. Not to sound corny, it's made things much quicker. You don't have to wait a week or two for your application to be received by the application admissions office. It takes now this by the click of a button. So at the end of the day, I think the efficiency with the technology speaks for itself. But there's still some elements that have been lost with the old process that I wish people could experience.
Thank you. And Paula, where do you stay on this? And Paula, do you also think that the differences in access to technology and in guidance and even understanding these systems, do they bring even more inequality, or on the opposite?
It's kind of tricky because I'm from Brazil, and in Brazil, our situation here, you can see the inequality and the digital divide walking on the streets, and on a daily basis. So in my school, I have students applying to international universities, and sometimes 2 blocks from my school, I might have students that are not going to even finish high school. So I have some data with me. In Brazil, 57.2% of students drop high school. And reasons are from financial factors. They don't have the money to pay tuition fees. Sometimes they do not adapt to the distance learning, or they do not adapt to the methodology of the university. They do not identify with the course. So they think they would apply to that course, but when they start studying, they see it's not exactly what they wanted to study. student profile as well. So the lower socioeconomic background sometimes makes students think they would be able to study something. They suddenly they just don't want to study that anymore. So what the issue here is that sometimes it needs to make sense for the student to apply, to have the experience. So most of the times we have to understand the student needs to understand their full process of application. So sometimes they don't have the way to make the application, or sometimes we can have to help them to apply, but they are not going to be able to continue the course, or sometimes it's not the course for them. So it's not only about the means, it's about the full process. That's what I mean.
Thank you, Paula. And Evan, where do you stay on this question?
So I don't necessarily think it's helped with inequality. I think the potential is there. Every kid seems to have a smartphone no matter what, although I think doing your application on your phone may not be the best sort of thing, because also the way that kids write on their phone is different than if they write an essay that they're
It's one of
turning
the
into
important
school.
things that you need a bigger tool for this, like a computer. It's
Yeah,
not
yeah, and they
possible.
might just be yeah, and because it's on their phone, instead of writing the whole thing out, they might just be like IDK, and so it does take away, but it's also, I don't think they know. I think that at least here in the US, especially California, I think that they're not informed. There's not people saying you can do this. It's here. It's not going to cost you that much. And so they're like, even though it's right there, if they can't see it, it doesn't help them. And like, I mean, my husband worked in inner city LA, and the students, they didn't know that they could go to college. They didn't know how accessible things could be. So it hasn't really done that. And the families that can buy the big fancy computers and hire people, or even just middle class, they know what to do. They see it. They're getting that access, and it's like, here, it's right here, and the arrow is pointing to it. So I don't think it's helped. I think the potential is there, but I don't think that it's being shown to the people it would help most.
Thank you. And Anna Maria, a question. Is there a way for students still to apply to Cambridge, but through regular post, sending documents by post rather than through UCAS?
I don't think there is. I think most applications will be via UCAS, because I did ask our admissions colleagues here. But I smile because I also applied when I applied back in 2012, and I also had to print everything and to send via post. And now it's a bit different, obviously, but it just shows how quickly the technology really develops. And also, it's same with what Dennis was saying about social media or technology. It evolves so rapidly, but we haven't evolved with it. It's like we weren't given a manual of how do I actually use this, right? So same with university choices. Students now have access. The digital systems, I think they did remove some barriers, like the geographical barrier, right? So before, maybe in the 1900s or something, maybe only certain schools or students from certain circles will be able to apply to the University of Cambridge. But now that information is accessible everywhere in the world. Any student from anywhere in this world can have access to that information, what they need to get in, what they need to apply, and so on. So in a way that helped. But in another way, that again relies on maybe access to technology, digital literacy, or some other aspects that not all students have. And also it doesn't really take into account those students that do receive much more support than others and can navigate a complex system with more support than others. And I'm thinking about Latin American students in particular. They might have access now to all this information, but they might not have access to that support of how to navigate this sort of complex information. And that's still an issue. It can also tap into the cultural differences, right? I noticed that for example, for students for Latin America, when they apply to scholarships or just apply in general, they are a bit shy in telling assessors about their achievements, whereas students from other countries, they don't have any problem in selling their sort of achievements and showing how great they are and so on. So again, that's something that hasn't really been addressed in terms of the support students actually get. Yes, they have access, more access now than ever, but I think they also still need that sort of support navigating the complex system.
Yeah, I like this point that you make, because I'm coming here from Eastern Europe, where no matter what you do, you're never fully that good, you know.
I
You're
just
a
say this because
neighbor here.
I'm from Romania. That's why I'm smiling, not because I approve
Yeah,
of this message.
yeah, exactly. So it doesn't matter how an excellent student you are, you're never fully excellent for your parents or for your teachers. Whereas in other systems, you're always so well supported. Dennis mentioned something about efficiency, and I'd like to relate efficiency to empathy and discuss a little bit about the human story, and whether it's relying on a human reader on the other side, the person reading the admissions. Does this introduce some kind of a bias that technology might actually reduce? Dennis, what do you think?
The question is if technology would reduce the human
Bias.
aspect of the admissions, the bias. Absolutely. It's funny. We have a conference, a national conference here, called NACAC, and there's another international one for ACAC. My point is, my colleagues and I, we like to try to get inside information from the college admissions people. Like, how are you guys doing it with all this technology? Do you have any secrets that you're not telling us about? How you're reading all these volumes of applications without increasing your staff? That's physically impossible. Like, how are you guys doing that? And that they were kind of tap dancing around the answer, basically implying that they were using computer systems, AI, to kind of expedite things even more. So I understand that this is like a perfect storm where we have all this technology, but they weren't prepared for it to kind of accelerate the process even more, to make it even harder for us to bring back the human aspect of it. I think that's what we're up against right now. This is what we're experiencing now as counselors and admissions officers. What is it going to look like 5 or 10 years from now, when the technology is going to get even more advanced, but there's not going to be even more increase of dormitories or beds at the college spaces that we're trying to build classes for? So it's an interesting topic that I think what the truth is that we're still trying to understand it and its capabilities, and try to figure out ways that we could put limits on what this technology could do, so it could make it easier for both admissions folks and also college counselors.
Thank you, Dennis. What you mentioned about the university doesn't want to make you get into their system and just have a sneak there and see what's going on, right? I'm
Yeah,
also
we tried to
curious.
take them out for drinks, but it didn't work. They weren't telling us the truth.
It's so secretive, like a secret society. Paula, how do you think this technology reduces the bias?
So I think that when decisions need to be made, you need a criteria. Efficiency most of the times. For you to be efficient, it's really difficult to be empathetic at the same time, because empathy requires time, personal interaction, understanding. And what I have seen from universities that some of them have been using alumni to interview students as a strategy to mitigate this conflict of not being empathetic and just trying to manage this huge load of paperwork to deal with. So I think that these interviews can provide some valuable insight that I know that it's difficult to capture through written applications alone. But these measures, they are still not enough if we think about the standardized aspects of this process, especially now that we see an increase of interest in using SATs and ACTs again from universities. So it limits our ability to fully understand as students' unique context. But it's a way of balancing this issue. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge that admissions office is facing.
Thank you, Paula. Let's twist the question a little bit and move on. Ellen, do you think that personal context, such as, family challenges, any type of disruptions, should play a role in the admission process?
So, yeah, I absolutely think the personal context is important. And I think it is coming into play. It's like I've had students that have had issues over the years, lost a parent, had an illness. And I tell them they should share it with the university. And it's not necessarily going to move the needle for some universities, but for others, because it's part of their story. We go back to what we said in the beginning, there should be authentic, and that is their story. It's made them who they are because they had this happen and they've come out the other side. Or they're still coming out the other side. I mean, it just depends on how it was. And so I do think, a lot of the universities are still reading what they are given with the essays. I mean, the universities that are asking for supplements, I mean, I don't think they're doing it just for fun. I think that they are really wanting to see what they say. And sometimes, I mean, I've heard from universities, those are more important to them because they know the personal statement gets all the help. So they actually feel they get the story out of the supplement that they ask, because kids are like, oh, it's just the supplement. But like, I do really feel that, that's where the human side can come in. I also know that recommendation letters sometimes will address things that have happened as well, so that the university is known. And so with all those pieces coming together, I think it's important to share, and I think it helps universities when they are making that decision.
Thank you, Paul. Sorry, thank you, Ellen. And it made me think of a student of mine who was pretty much sure that the supplements is a way of universities to torture students. And if you write your supplements, then you've undergone torture enough and you should be accepted. And he was really mad that he didn't get accepted even writing all of his supplements. Ana Maria, where do you stay on this position overall?
So we're fortunate here that at Cambridge, we do still have a very holistic way of assessing a student. So like I said, it's not just about their IB grades, but also their supercurricular engagement, what sort of activities they've done outside of what their teacher asked them to do for a grade. It's also the teacher reference they're looking at. So in the UK, students will apply via UCAS, and they also have this teacher reference. And we do recommend teachers to write about contextual information in that teacher reference. So context about the actual school, how long has the school had the IB system, for example, or has the student did they have to study independently one of the courses because the school does not offer that, or they do ask for this sort of contextual information. Of course, they look at the personal statement, they look at any sort of performance in tests, depending on the courses they want to apply for, performance in the interview, and so on. But we also have, for example, My Cambridge application that students must write as well, in addition to UCAS. And in there, they are asked about topics they've studied at school, for example, precisely to kind of tailor that sort of experience more to them. And if they're asked to come to an interview, for the interviewer to make sure they don't ask something they have not learned about. So it's definitely that sort of personal touch and that sort of personal context is quite a central focus for admissions at Cambridge still.
Thank you. And we can obviously discuss this issue with the subjectivity and partiality and holistic approach for many more minutes. But I actually want to move to the counselor's role and ask you, the counselors, how your role has changed in the past year. So in a world of AI tools and abundant online resources, how has your job evolved? Dennis?
Yeah, so I went to high school in the late 80s, early 90s, so I'm deliberately aging myself to kind of share that even for me, even though I feel younger, I'm not. And I have to be very up to speed with technology just for my personal life. So if you would imagine all these things that I have to know now as a professional, I've had to kind of up my game, as they say, to kind of match where the students are because of the access that they have to technology. I could see there Ellen like giggling a little bit because she's probably in the same boat. It's kind of embarrassing. I hate to say because these kids like know a lot of things that has helped them with their college process, different websites, different ways of using the tools that we use, just very quick to kind of navigate websites. I'm a little bit slower, so it takes longer for me to get information, use it. So that's what I'm up against as a high school counselor. It's important, like for me to meet my students where they're at. So I've put a lot of pressure on myself to kind of learn things more that they're accessible to, even if it's Instagram. Like they talk about Instagram in colleges, like I don't use Instagram for anything, but now I had to get an account just to kind of be at the same level where so that I could understand what they're referencing. I personally don't like to use a lot of social media to separate my personal life with my professional life. But even in here at our school, you know, the kids use social media to put where they're going to college, and we have to kind of um, police that now to make sure that the information's accurate. So my job has changed a lot because of technology. It's not just about, you know, helping kids make a match with colleges, but also information management.
Thank you. I have to admit that it's no surprise that I have the three of you as counselors in my panel because I was looking for counselors who have a lot of background and experience in the field and can tell the stories of what it was before that and exactly tell me how the digitalization of the process has changed your job. So Paula, moving on to you.
Well, every week I have a student coming to my room asking, Miss, I heard on TikTok, I heard on Instagram, and it's a nightmare because most of the time it's not necessarily true. And the students are always following another teenager that is spreading news that are from channels that are not even from the university. And this is complicated. I feel that I am going back to the time 15 years ago, almost 20 years ago, in which we were teaching students how to search on Google. So you need to search, you need to go to the proper channels, you need to find the proper source because they are just basically listening to gossip and they are believing it's true. So, and they come to me to check if the information is true or if I know it. So, I am basically teaching them how to find the proper information in the correct channel. And I tell them if you want to use AI as a starting point, that's fine. But remember, you have to double check the information. So I'm basically double checking the information all my students are bringing to me.
Thank you, Paula. And Ellen, how has your role as a counselor changed?
So it was funny. I was going to bring up the Mythbuster too, because yes, I get a lot of stories. I mean, a couple of the favorites in recent times was I heard it's okay to go 10% over the word limit on Common App. So I'm going to do that so I can have longer essays. And also, if you apply to 10 schools on the Common App, you won't get into a UC, a University of California school. And I'm like, that was from a parent, by the way. So yes, yeah, it makes no sense. So I do have that. I also find I have become more attached to my phone. It's that, as Dennis said, meeting kids where they're at. They don't do emails. They sometimes don't even do in person. But that phone device, oh yeah, I can get typed messages. And so it is one of those, and I use a portal, so all the text messages go through there, so they're saved. And I often say, like, hey, I might send you a link. If you want to look at it big, you could do it on your computer. But it's also just, I mean, that is really where it has changed, although I do tease the kids, I can type faster than any of them. So
Like that. And Anna Maria, when it comes to your role at the university, do you think that it can ever be changed by technology?
I mean, I'm not really sure. I mean, it's already kind of shaped through technology and the fact that we have access to all of these systems and tools and webinars and Zoom links, and everything is at the, you know, one click away, like Dennis said. But we're still valuing that sort of human and in-person element. We're still traveling and meeting with our students, with our counselors. We're still ultimately focusing on that aspect as well. And I think it's really good to have those sort of conversations and support, because I think students nowadays, because of so many choices, they still need to think more about the fit rather than maybe the prestige or what their parents tell them to do or where to go. Um, and ultimately, they do need that sort of guidance also from counselors. Just it's a question about, will I like it there? Is this the right environment for me? And that question can be asked by can be answered by AI or somebody else. That can only be answered by themselves with the help of counselors or with our help. So, we're still there. The digital side and all these tools, yes, they help us and they help students, but it's also about how to manage that and how to manage the systems in a way to leave room for the human personal element.
Thank you, Anna Maria. And what you mentioned is just bringing me to my last but not least question on misconceptions. And I'd like to ask the counselors, what are some of the major misconceptions their students and the families they work with have about admissions, and whether the digitalization of the process actually amplifies these misconceptions? Dennis?
Yeah, for my community, this goes to misinformation of rankings and the value of the rankings. In my community, for better, for the worse, the rankings are everything. If they hear that this college is better than that one, and they could prove it just through the rankings by this source, that's what's important to them. It's not so much that this other college is actually a better fit for them. That's what we're up against, and that's kind of been around in our side of the fence for many years, but I think it's actually become more complicated now because the colleges are getting even more competitive with each other. And because of that, their data is not so accurate. What you have to kind of do some research to understand, like what you're saying before, I forgot who said it, like where's that statistic coming from? Is it only this year or was it that year? What type of students or respondents were there? That's what we're also trying to educate the families, just to be careful and be very careful about the type of information that you're getting in the rankings and how that could be very misleading in the end result of what you're trying to do for your child.
Thank you, Dennis. And Paula, what are the misconceptions your students and families face?
Well, here in Brazil, families are really present during the application process. So I think that the biggest one is that they believe that admissions officers are easier to reach and faster to answer. And of course, it's not, because I believe that they are having more demand now because of the increased numbers of applications. So I think that parents believe they are going to answer at any time. They would be available to talk at any time. Any emails they are going to send are going to be answered. And on the contrary, it's not. So I think is the opposite. So I still have to keep telling my parents that's not so simple. So if they need anything, talk to me, that maybe we can try to arrange something.
Thank you, Paula and Evan.
So, kind of what Dennis was saying, there's only 50 universities out there total. That's it. Those are the ones you can apply to. Otherwise, your life is over. And so it's helping them see that there's not, it's like for here in California, I always say UC Santa Barbara is the great exception, because I got a kid telling me they want to study business and they want to have big football And and I'm like, UC Santa Barbara doesn't have any of that. And like, I know, I just love it so much. Like they just, helping them see, but then that's not necessarily the right fit for you. That, and also the only way I'm going to get into University X, and this is more a US thing, is I have to apply early decision. If I'm going to get into a top ranked school, it has to be early decision. And it's like they may not even research it. And then what happens sometimes with students is like they don't get into a school early decision. So then it's like, oh, I'm just going to pick this one for early decision round 2 because then I'll get in. And they're not really looking at, no, you could get in, and you're binding yourself to something when there could be other great opportunities, not to just stay focused on one thing or a ranking because someone with data that you don't even understand that what they're using for it has said this school is in the top 10. So
Thank you, Ellen. And Anna Maria, when you meet with counselors and parents and students, what are their biggest misconceptions about the admission process in Cambridge?
I would say is the sort of I think they're looking for that formula for success. Things like if I did A, B, and C, then that means I'm in or I'll get in. And yes, we are transparent here in the UK. And yes, this is exactly what you need to get in. But they're often trying to look at statistics, look at which college accepted how many students last year, in which college is there a higher proportion of international students, maybe I'll apply to that college to have higher chances. And it doesn't really work like that because it's just statistics at the end of the day. That can change easily for the next round of admissions, right? So a lot of students might apply to the college that admitted most international students last year, and then the admissions rate will go down because of that. So it's all relational, right? There's not really a formula to get in. Obviously, you need to meet some entry requirements, and you need to go through the application process and sort of be supported throughout that, but it's not secret formula that if I exactly have this course or I do exactly this or I do exactly this sort of a super curricular, I'll get in. I think that's kind of a misconception. And going back to what my colleagues were saying about rankings as well, rankings can measure different things and can be looked at in different ways. And it's not necessarily a good idea to rely solely on that, but I can see why in this sort of noise and when there are so many choices, you need an anchor, you need something to hold yourself to be like, okay, I'll just choose this ranking and I'll feel comfortable choosing this university because it has a good ranking, so it must be the right fit. And I think students and parents often forget that it's not just about that, it's about how will you feel there. Is that the right environment? Would you like the supervisions at Cambridge? Do you thrive in that sort of teaching style? Maybe you don't. So it's just having that sort of conversation.
And while we are with you, Anna Maria, we have 2 more minutes, so I have one last question. I wanted to discuss the possible battle of AI versus AI, but we won't have the time for this. So my last question for all of you would be, if you could redesign one element of the admission process for the digital age, what would you change and why? So Anna Maria, what would you change in the admission process?
I think for students to be more aware of how decisions are made and how fit is calculated. And also, I don't know if this is actually doable, but for students to get feedback, I know this is not really possible for the high volume of applications and so on, but I think that would be a really good insight to have for students as well.
I'd love that as well. Ellen, how about you? What would you change in the admission process?
So I know a lot of universities in Europe already do this. I kind of want to see the interview come back. I mean, with the fear of losing that, the human side, it's like an AI could answer things. And yes, I know there's deep fakes and that sort of thing. But I think if you had an interview, and I know it would be tough for universities to implement it, but if you could talk to the student about what they wrote, talk to the student, find out who they are, and just return to that human interaction. So they're not necessarily just texting on a phone. So, the interview.
Thank you. And Paula, how about you?
I totally agree with Helen because I know that I have worked with special needs students, and sometimes some students, they can't express themselves by writing. So sometimes speaking for them is best. So at least a video or an audio would be best than writing. So if not via an interview or a video, but I agree with her.
Thank you. And then it's finally,
Yeah, so for me, it's the concept of having like a resident wanted to become a doctor. I would love to see professionals looking to go into the college admissions field have a requirement to have time working in a college admissions office, but also a requirement to have time working in a high school side. So you could see the very interesting nuances that both offices have with regards to student interaction, technology, et cetera, because I think that would be integral for both sides of the fence to understand the complexity of our jobs to help
so
students.
basically an exchange of professions. I like that.
Yes, free of charge.
Well, we have to finish now so that everybody can get in their meetings, but thank you very much to the speakers and to the audience. So many other things can be discussed in this topic, but unfortunately we only have 1 hour, so we have to stick to the basics. But thank you very much all, and enjoy the last few hours of the e-conference. And Anna Maria, I'm gonna see you in your session in about 1.5 hours. So if you want to learn more about the admissions at Cambridge, join Anna Maria in the next info session slot. Thank you very much again, and I'll see you during the closing session. Bye.
Thank you.